Good morning to everyone. My name is Slavko Solar, and I'll be moderating today's webinar, UN Framework Classification for Resources for Secondary Raw Materials. It is an introductory webinar, promotional one, organized by Futuram, the EU Horizon 2020 project, and UNEC expert group on resource management. Before we start, I would say a few house rules. We'll be recording the session, so the session or the workshop will be later available on the website. I would kindly ask you all to put your microphone on mute so that we don't have disturbances. And please put all the questions in the chat that would be further then discussed with the presenters. So this would be from my side from the start. And I would very much, how do I do this? Yeah, I would give the word to David MacDonald, the chair of the expert group on resource management, for a short welcome to the workshop and actually to continue with the introduction to the United States classification framework for resources, a very essentials of it. So Dave.
Thank you very much, Slavko. And welcome to all of you. Glad to have you here for this discussion of the application of the United Nations Framework Classification for Resources to Secondary Raw Materials. Before we get into some of the specifics about application in the UNFC to secondary raw materials in particular, I always like to start things off with kind of a discussion about why we do classification to begin with. So we kind of understand some of the strategic and tactical rationale behind doing the process of classification at all. I always like to think that classification is something that we start doing from a very early age in our life, whether it's taking blocks and sorting them out by color or shape. It's one of the very first tasks that we learn to do as children. And we continue to do this through our life. And if you can go to the next slide there. Yeah. I have a very large record collection. Now somehow over the time period of submitting this talk, my records have somehow turned into books, but we'll carry on. We'll carry on with this and assume that there are records there. We'll use music as a way to do this. And so I've got a very large collection of LPs. And one of the things that people who collect LPs like to do is we periodically like to listen to them, of course. But even more than that, we like to periodically take them all off the shelf and reorganize them, to resort through them. And how I choose to classify them really might depend on the day of the week, frankly, about how I choose to do it. I might do them by genre. So I might have all of my Eurovision winners in this pile here. I might have all of my pop here. I might have my classical here, my jazz over into this section here, and then divide them up that way. And that tells me an awful lot about the types of music that I enjoy listening to. Do I have a lot of jazz albums? Do I have a lot of classical? Which are the areas that perhaps I need to spend more time on to build that part of my collection? But that's just one way of classifying them. I could also do them by artists. I could do it by composer. So I could have my Taylor Swift here. I have my Dolly Parton here, my Bach over here. I could do it by instruments, by the type of speed of the music, if I'm going to be making a mixtape of them and want to make sure that I've got tempos similarly. I can do them I can also order them by kind of more arcane issues, like when a particular album was made, when it was recorded, or even when I personally purchased that album. And the interesting thing about doing this classification like this is that every time I do it, I learn something more about my collection, areas that I need to build more, areas that I probably have too much, areas that I probably need to get rid of a few things. But I also learn about the types of music I enjoy, and basically what my collection consists of, and where are areas that I need to continue to focus on to build it further. It's also interesting, though, that if I brought you into my library to look at this collection, and I didn't tell you how it was organized, and I said, go and find that Dancing Queen by ABBA, it would be extremely difficult for you to do that if you didn't know how it was classified. If I tell you how I've classified it, and I tell you I've done it by alphabetically by artist, you'd be able to find that album very, very quickly. You'd know immediately, go over to the start of the collection, and you'd be able to find it. If I told you it was sorted by year it was recorded, you'd have to think a little bit, but you might find it relatively quickly by doing that. But if I told you it's sorted by the date that I purchased that album, you'd have no idea where to go into that collection there. So the point is that how something is organized and classified really depends on the people who are going to be using it, as well as by those who are the people doing the classification. Every time it's done, you learn something about those materials that have been classified. What are the barriers to progressing those? But we also need to keep in mind that the classification also depends on who the applier of that system is going to be. We go to the next slide there. So if we move away from my records now, so this is this idea about who our stakeholders are. And if we're going to classify secondary raw materials in a way that's useful, we need to think about who is going to be using this classification system. Is it going to be experts within industry that know an awful lot about the system and the issues that are associated with it? Is it going to be governments who are going to be taking this information to make big decisions on our future energy and raw material needs to be able to meet the needs of their population? Is it going to be the finance community that perhaps is investing in industry and projects and want to know how to allocate that capital for them? Is it society, so the people within our nation states that want to see what the impact of this project is going to be on their local environment? Or is it going to be larger scale mineral studies? Each of these people have a different level of sophistication with the information and classification system and what things are classified, and how they interact with that data is going to be impacted by that. Now, the UNFC, go to the next slide there. So the UNFC, the United Nations Framework Classification System, is a unique classification system amongst all resources that I'm aware of, and that it allows us to classify all different types of commodities: minerals, petroleum, renewables, injection, anthropogenic, secondary raw materials, uranium, basically all different types of commodities, and to classify these on a level playing field, looking at both the volumes or the amounts of each quantity that's being assessed, but also looking at the issues related to the project efficiency. So what's the maturity of that project in moving forward? And also looking at the environmental, economic, social, and even governance issues associated with that project to move it forward. And by looking at all these different issues, we can start to make very informed and intelligent choices on what are the best projects to move forward. And it's not always an easy answer. It's if we're looking at energy issues, for example, I think it's very easy to say, well, clearly we don't want to move in today's climate. We don't want to move a petroleum project forward. We want to move solar projects forward. But you really need to step back and look at what the total impacts of that decision are going to be made, both on a macro level, a longer time period level, a short time period, and also the impact on the local environment. In a given circumstance, if you're working in a brownfield area already, it may be preferable to have a petroleum project move forward rather than introduce issues associated with the use of land that would be necessary for a solar project. These are very complicated decisions, and all issues need to be looked at to make the right decision at the right time and the right place for moving those projects forward. Go to the next slide there. And this is where I really think the benefits of the United Nations Framework Classification and its sister publication, the United Nations Resource Management System, that allows us to make real principle-based decisions on these multiple commodity issues. And there's this little figure on the side here of the scale where we can look at a project through both the social, environmental, economic, and technical issues associated with each project to make the decision about what's the right one to move forward. And we can do this looking at the needs of all of our stakeholders, whether it's government, the environment, the population, financing, making sure that we have the right amount of critical skills identified early on to do these. And we can do this in a level way across multiple commodities. Now, the United Nations Framework Classification has been endorsed by the United Nations ECOSOC and for global deployment and application. And we're finding that application of the tool is really picking up around the world. We've clearly within the areas of the EU and its application to critical raw materials, we're the favored tool for that. We're used global. The African Union has adopted the United Nations Framework Classification for its minerals reporting throughout the country. We're very heavily used within the state of Mexico. We're finding that the United Nations Framework Classification and that resource management system are being used more and more. And it's a tool that can give us the information we need to be able to address and move projects forward. So I'll stop there with just that brief introduction to why I think classification is important and how our tools can be used. But I'll pass back over to Slavko for the remainder of the session. And I look forward to a good set of conversations with all of you today.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. I know you are busy and you have to leave us, so you are free to go now.
Thank you very much.
And we'll be able to answer the question that might come from your introduction. Thank you. Thank you again. I will just move on and introduce the second speaker, Mr. Ulrich Kral, the chair of EGRM Anthropogenic Working Groups. He will be telling us a bit, he will narrow down the topic way more to anthropogenic resources, describe the recent activities within what we would be calling the secondary raw materials. So Ulrich, I guess everything is ready and you can kick off.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Slavko. Can you see my slides?
Yes, all good.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Yeah, good morning. As already mentioned, I'm Ulrich Kral. I'm chairing the Anthropogenic Resource Working Group at the Expert Group of Resource Management. And today I'm pleased to give you some insights on the recent activities regarding the application of UNFC to anthropogenic resources. First slide, why we need the UNFC to make comparable estimates on the future availability of secondary raw materials. First, I think the sustainable, secure, and affordable raw material supply is urgently needed across all countries on the globe to manage the transition to renewable energies, for instance. It's also needed to meet the needs of specific industries and stakeholders and to sustain and enable a modern lifestyle. As by today, the primary raw materials dominate the market, but the secondary raw materials, briefly called SRM, become more important for several reasons. It's, for instance, to decrease the import dependence of critical raw materials and others. And it's also because secondary raw materials in general have a lower environmental impact compared to primary mining of raw materials. How to do this? So how to achieve a sustainable, secure, and affordable raw material supply? Of course, it can be addressed by primary raw materials, but also with the supply from secondary sources. So the production of secondary raw materials requires the development of recycling projects. It's like for primary raw materials, at the beginning of each raw material supply chain, at the very beginning, stands a successful mining project. The raw materials are exploited, are produced, commodities are produced and enter the market, enter the use phase, and then they become residues. And once they become residues, they provide a potential for being recycled, and there are a potential for producing secondary raw materials that are feed back to the economic loop in the context of a circular economy. What is most important is during the development of recycling projects is to de-risk the recycling projects from costly failures. This is needed in order to protect the investments. Let's talk about what about. In order to de-risk the recycling projects, you need an overview on the maturity level of the recycling projects over time. It means a project inventory can be used by project pipeline management in order to get an overview of the current maturity level of each recycling project in order to identify and communicate the risks during the development phase. For this monitoring of the recycling projects, you can use the UNFC, because it provides a 360 degrees view on project maturity. It is shown on the left-hand side that the UNFC basically considers 3 dimensions or 3 criteria. The first one is the socio-environmental domain issue, the second is the economic issue, and the third one is the technical issue. So all aspects which are needed to achieve the sustainable development goals and to develop sustainable recycling projects are considered in the UNFC. So what are anthropogenic resources? Just to use simple words, it's materials that are handled by humans, let's say. It includes mining and metallurgical residues. You see them on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, it includes the material stocks which are currently in use and the post-consumer residues. This includes, for instance, batteries, waste electronic and equipment, cars, end-of-life vehicles. It includes construction demolition waste, municipal solid waste, and also slags and ashes, for instance, which are secondary wastes after waste treatment, for instance. So it covers the whole bulk of materials that are handled by humans that are present in our anthroposphere, let's say. And once they become residues, they are available for the future production of secondary raw materials. And now I'm going into the details about mining and metallurgical residues on the one hand and on post-consumer residues on the other. On this slide, you see a map with projects in the mining and metallurgical residue sector. This initiative was started during a European expert network, and this work is currently headed by Carlo Cormio from Italy. And he and his group started to map storage sites for mining and metallurgical residues across the world. Here you see about 70 different storage sites, and they analyzed which of these storage sites for mining and metallurgical residues were already classified with an existing standard, let's say. And they found that about 50% of those that were already screened were already classified by using the Canadian National Instrument 4311, by the JORC code, or by the SAMREC code. And 2 of these applications or case studies used the UNFC framework. And what you see here is that these 3 codes, the National Instrument 4311, the JORC code, and the SAMREC code, are part of the CRISCO family template. It means this is an industrial standard in order to communicate resources and reserves to stocks, for instance, to stock exchange market. And as these projects were already classified by the CRISCO template, they can also be classified by using the UNFC, the United Nations Framework Classification System. And how to do it? The UNECE, in cooperation with the colleagues from CRISCO, developed a bridging document to convert the data from the JORC code, for instance, to the UNFC. And this is needed in order to achieve comparable estimates, because the UNFC can be applied across all commodities and across all sources. So if we want to compare the future availability based on of raw materials between post-consumer residues and mining residues or metallurgical residues, we need a common system, a common classification system, and this is the UNFC. The UNFC allows to classify mining and metallurgical residues as well as post-consumer residues like construction and demolition waste or projects in the field of waste electronic and equipment. Next slide is project classification with feedstocks from post-consumer residues. On the left-hand side, you see a map where classifications have already been applied. Yeah, you see that starting from the right to the left, you see in Japan we see 3 applications. In China, we see 1 application. In the EU, we see, in the European-wide context, 2 applications. In Austria, there were 5. In Switzerland, 2. France, 1. And in Belgium, 4 different applications. And these applications used different classification systems. 7 case studies use the McKelvey principles to classify the resources. So it means really they classified the quantities. And the remaining ones use the UNFC. So it means the UNFC classifies the project based on the maturity level. And you see, based on these 2 classifications, it's 2 different systems to classify it. But the only one that allows to compare all projects across different commodities and sources is the UNFC. So the overall objective is to bring existing classifications into UNFC and to use the UNFC for further project classifications in order to achieve this common playing field. If we're going into a little bit into the detail and have a look on the different type of feedstocks or that were used to classify the projects, we see a wide range of feedstocks. It starts with computers. There was 1 application for construction and demolition waste. It was applied to magnets, slags and ashes, waste electronic and equipment. It was also used to classify landfill mining projects and end-of-life vehicles. And all these case studies were performed on different levels. Yeah. So we have site-specific assessments, for instance, for landfill or for very specific recycling plants. We see applications on the regional scale, and we see applications on the national scale and also supranational level, like in the European Union. So what we learned from these studies is that there are different classifications currently in use. So hopefully they will be streamlined in order to have a common classification system in the future. And it also shows the scalability. So you can apply the UNFC on the national, on the regional, and the site-specific level. So it fits together, let us say, and the projects can be aggregated on a higher level. My last slide is about the essentials for monitoring the project maturity. So at the very end, you need an operational tool to monitor the maturity level and the risks of the recycling projects. And this is done by project inventories. These project inventories can be located or on the EU level, it can be on the national level or even on company level. And these 3 levels correspond to each other. So the projects that are assessed on a company level can also be mapped on the national level and can also be mapped on the European level. But what is needed in order to set up such project inventories? You have to go to individual recycling or to each individual recycling project, and it basically requires 4 steps. The first one is the project definition, including mapping all the stakeholders, all the needs, the commodities that should be produced, the expectation rate, for instance, the lifetime of the project, the geographical scope, the feedstock, and so on. The next step is then to evaluate the projects against the 3 criteria of the UNFC. It's the socioeconomic viability, it's the technical feasibility, and it's also the level of confidence, which brings in the uncertainties regarding the quantities that can be produced. And once this evaluation is completed, you move to the core step of resource classification in order to classify it. And for this one, you can use the UNFC. So a sound classification of project builds on the rigid project evaluation. And the final step, which is the missing link between the UNFC and the project inventories, is project reporting. So a template is needed in order to make sure that the client who uses the project inventory gets the right information. And getting the right information can be achieved by standardizing it through reporting. There are a couple of support activities from the UNEC Expert Group of Resource Management. The Expert Group of Resource Management developed consensus-oriented documents, let's just say. It's specification and guidelines. The latest publication is the application of UNFC in Europe, but basically it can be applied globally. And these documents refer to the stage of project definition and to the stage of project classification. Yeah, what is currently not regulated is the wrong term, but where is no little to no guidance, is the phase of project evaluation and the phase of project reporting. As you might know, the CRISCO template is also combined with the reporting standard or such as PERC or whatever, and such a reporting standard is currently missing for the UNFC. And the same is for project evaluation. Of course, there are some criteria that need to be considered in order to make a sound evaluation. It's the economics, it's the social acceptance, it's the environmental impact, the legal approval and all this stuff. But currently there is little guidance on how to really make this evaluation of the projects. And I think the future work of the Anthropogenic Resource Working Group in cooperation with all the stakeholders, it means with the member states of the European Union and beyond, but also with scientists and project developers is needed in order to standardize this evaluation. Let me come to the take-home messages of my talk today. 3 take-home messages. The first one is UNFC is in support of project maturity monitoring. The inventories can be set up on company level, on national level, and on European level, and these 3 levels fit together. So it means that projects that are evaluated on a company by a company can also be fed into a national inventory and can be fed into an inventory on EU level. And it addresses different target groups. It means for the European level or any other supranational national level, it's important to make strategic decisions on the development of future recycling and mining projects. The second point is then if you're using UNFC, you can compare the recycling projects on a common playing field with the mining sector and across different recycling projects. And this was emphasized by Dave MacDonald in his introduction talk. You need this common language, the common definitions, the common terms and principles to classify the recovery projects. And this can be achieved by the UNFC. And the last point here is you have a 360-degree view, 360-degree view, on project maturity. It means it considers the environmental dimension, it considers the social dimension, and it considers the technical dimension. And it considers also these uncertainties that come along with the exploration of resources. And these are considered by the level of confidence. The second take-home message is that the UNFC was successfully tested in various case studies around the globe. It was applied to mining residues. It was applied to post-consumer residues like computers. So it works, but the current applications are just limited in terms of number. It means it was less than 20. So in order to close the resource data gap, further applications of the UNFC are needed. And the third take-home message is it needs standardization and harmonization. We have seen that these 4 stages, the first stage was project definition. The third stage was project classification, where UNFC comes in. But the second and the fourth stage, this evaluation of the project, needs to be further standardized. There are some developments in this direction, and there are institutions who develop decision trees on how to make this evaluation and how to make the bridge between project evaluation and classification. For instance, for mining residues, such decision trees are already in place. The same is for landfill mining projects, but it's currently not in place in order to evaluate metal recovery from waste electronic and equipment, for instance. And the second need for standardization addresses the reporting in order to define the communication channels between the UNFC practitioners on the one hand and the clients on the other. And with these take-home messages, I want to thank you for your attendance, and I'm looking forward to respond to any further questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ulrich. I think you already have a question in the chat, if you can answer that for the start. And I will, do you see the question?
Yeah, I see them. There was one question from Anita. Why were slags and ashes both placed in the same category when their mineralogical and physical properties are so different? Well, this categorization, it's not, the categorization doesn't come from the UNFC. It was just to put these things together. Indeed, they are not, they differ in terms of material quality and also of quantity and of locations where they're produced. This figure was just used to communicate that the UNFC can be applied to slags and ashes as well. And this was currently done. It was done for case studies in the city of Vienna. It was done in the canton of Zurich in Switzerland. So there's no doubt that there are serious differences between these two types of feedstocks, let's say. But for this purpose here in this presentation, it was just to communicate that it can be applied to both types of resources.
Thank you, Ulrich. Thank you. Yes, I would just add that the different types differ in the geological knowledge axis, which is degree of confidence axis. And there, this difference is very, very clear on that level, but not on the level higher up of the whole classification. We are slightly in delay, so I would move on from the more theoretical to a very practical part. The colleagues from the Futuram project prepared the examples, how this is actually put in place. I would not say anymore. We have 4 case studies, 2 from residuals from extractive industry and 2 from a post-residual consumers. So I would give the word immediately to Ronald. Ronald, you are with us?
Yes, I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, and please, I have the slides. Tell each time a slide so that we move the slide on.
Yes, you can start.
Okay, we start with this one.
All right, I will be talking about a case from Sweden that was prepared by colleagues as part of the mission to the government. We can take the next slide. It deals with, as a part of the mission to the government, we were investigating building a database of mining waste, and it contributes both tailings as well as waste rock, which you can see on the map on the right, and the focus was on critical raw materials. And in particular, we had 17 waste sites characterized. We had 14 tailings where we had drilled and also made modeling through geophysics. Our case here is from a old abandoned mine that was iron ore that was in production until early 90s, which has a large amount of waste. But in particular, the target is a small tailings, so it has a resource current of 3.4 million tons. And we know this because there is a company that is currently exploring it for recovery. And it has done a scoping study that is under the JORC process. Next slide. In the scoping study, it's natural, it's the process that is also in focus. So firstly, we find out how well-determined resource is, and then we need the process. So in order to get to the critical raw materials, the iron is initially removed and also used as a raw material. And then the next concentrate, phosphate rock, is being extracted, and in this third one, rare earth elements. For the first 2, iron and phosphate rock, the process seems to be working very well at lab scale, whereas for the rare earth elements, it merits further development. And the scoping study can be found at the webpage of Gränges Berg Exploration Junior Company. Next slide, please. We also developed a database and a tool to visualize the classification in terms of UNFC. And the classification, in it, we deal with both the resource, how well determined is that. We deal with the technical feasibility, that is, how well can we recover the raw materials. And you can see this in the top, and the colors is that it's a mixture of it's moved both the process as well as the permitting. In the permitting, the company has achieved access to land, and they are working upon the procedure to making the permits with the initial contacts with the authorities. And so the road for them, at least, appears for them to be clear. It remains to be seen if this will be granted and how this will be working, because this will be the first time that will be permitted this type of mining activity from secondary mining in Sweden. The concentrates, they are of high quality, so it merits use of it. So the apatite will give a highly valuable product for as fertilizer, as well as the high value of magnetite. Once the permits are there, everything will move into the green place, and the commercial scale processing appears to be working. Next slide. So what we can say is that we work up and to look at how this instrument will function. First of all, it's a snapshot in time. So if we do this last year, we do it this year, we do it next year, we can see if the project proceeds and how and why or why not. We can also see the challenges here, that the rare earth elements is lagging behind the other raw materials. We also see that permitting procedures need to be finalized. And we can see that recovery of the critical raw materials, it depends upon recovery of, in this case, iron. And it needs, in order to get strong financing of the project at the end. It also enables, of course, then the comparison between the different commodities and other cases. Thank you. Next slide.
Thank you very much, Ronald. We will move to the next case. Rudolf, I guess you are with us.
Yes, can you hear me?
Fine. Yes, we can hear you. Perfect.
Okay, so welcome everybody. It's a great pleasure to be able to present. We might have some formatting issues with the slides due to technical problems, so apologies for that. Next slide, please, to start right away. So our case is dealing with the tailings from which we might potentially extract tungsten, situated in Portugal. And the main goal of this case study was to test the UNFC's applicability to base metal tailings. So it was the first of its kind. And we basically tried to see what options does a private mining company have, judging from the SRISCO and UNFC perspective. But it's important to highlight that this is a scientific scoping study, so the project hasn't been implemented yet. Materials we used were mostly public, and wherever we had gaps, we filled in with model assumptions. Our process for the classification of the approach was to first define the project, so to define the goal, define the frame of the study, then to characterize the material. For that, we used mineralogical data. Then we evaluated the project development status, basically by performing a net present analysis in combination with an uncertainty analysis to take into account varying raw material prices. And in the end, we categorized and classified the project. Next slide, please. So to have some background information, the tailing storage facility is called Cabeça do Piau, and it's part of the Minas da Penasqueira mining operation in Portugal, which sits on one of the most important tungsten deposits in Europe. and it was abandoned after nearly 90 years of operation. We have almost 700,000 cubic meters of tailings, plus, of course, overburden, plus dead rock. And most significant environmental issues that we have are the physical instability of the facility. So it's partially collapsing and might collapse even more in the future. We have heavy metal pollution due to dust emission and also acid mine drainage, which is discharged directly into the adjacent river. The three scenarios that we evaluated were number 0, rehabilitation. Number 1, the extraction of basically tungsten and zinc, so that we can convert almost 1% of the tailings into commodities, and we can increase this number by adding copper, iron, and sulfur to the commodities. Next slide, please. So the results, scenario 1 and 2 are economically viable, mainly due to the high tungsten price, but the tungsten price is also volatile, so it's some sort of economic risk as well. Then if we judge the results from SRISCO and UNFC perspective, we see that the scenario 0 is not economically viable, and despite the fact that we're preserving the raw material potential for a future operation, the SRISCO is disregarding this scenario as a viable option. In scenario 1, of course, we have economic viability, so SRISCO and UNFC acknowledge this scenario. In scenario number 2, we have even higher returns with spreading the economic risk, which is also acknowledged by both classification systems. But if we now filter by the externalities, which we are reducing in all 3 scenarios, because we are preventing current and future pollution, then only the UNFC is sort of seeing this as project driving factors. Next slide, please. So to sum everything up, we were able to successfully apply the UNFC to base metal tailings. And we see 2 main strengths of the UNFC as compared to SRISCO, which is, first of all, the UNFC is considering more aspects, like Ulrich Kral defined this as a 360-degree view on a project, which, of course, creates transparency for all stakeholders. And the UNFC is highlighting sustainable acting, which we could see by the environmental and social benefits that are regarded as project driving factors. And to finish, UNFC still has some development potential. The most critical, as for me, for a user, is to say that it needs improved user guidance, similar as the SRISCO template, which guides you quite nicely through how you should perform a case study analysis. Next slide, and that's all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rudolf. We'll just move on, and I will ask if Andrea is with us. Are you with us, Andrea?
Yes, I'm with you. Can you hear me?
Perfect. We can hear you. Good. We can see you. The floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, I would like to present a case study about the potential to provide critical raw materials from magnets in Austria. Next slide, please. Yeah. So this is part of a study, part of a scientific paper that was published within my doctoral thesis already a couple of years ago, back in 2015-16. In this paper, we compared 2 scenarios for the future utilization of end-of-life permanent magnets in wind turbines, currently in use in Austria, as I said back then. And the 2 scenarios were to compare the reuse of permanent magnets and the recovery then so the recycling of magnets and the recovery of neodymium, ferrum, boron, dysprosium, and praseodymium via hydrometallurgical methods. The focus was on the economic, the financial viability, and on the technical feasibility. The motivation was to develop suitable management strategies for future waste flows. So here, yeah, next, thank you. Here you see the two scenarios, one reuse and one recycling. As I said, permanent magnets in wind turbines in Austria. The data source, so we had data on production installation of wind turbines and their capacity in Austria. Different options for dismantling. So one's the reuse of permanent magnets and one's hydrometallurgical methods to extract these elements. For the cost, so we considered separating the magnets and demagnetization for the reuse. For the recycling scenarios, separating magnets and demagnetize them. And then in the following step to extract rare earth elements from the magnets. And for, on the revenue side, so we considered the prices for secondary products, so the price of used permanent magnets and the prices for rare earth elements and metals. Next, please. And here you see the results. So originally, this UNFC was a three-dimensional representation. So you see on this G-axis the degree of confidence. So how certain you are about the originally the geological knowledge, but about how much knowledge you have about the composition of a deposit. Then you see the E-axis, so the environmental, socio, and economic viability. And then on the F-axis, the technical feasibility. And these are the results of all the papers. So we also classified landfills and e-waste. But here you see the results also for these two scenarios for permanent magnets from wind turbines. We classified them as a G1, so the degree, so the knowledge on the composition is very good. And also the economic viability as a E1 was very good for both scenarios, for reuse and the recycling scenario, but with the reuse slightly better. However, on this F-axis for the technical feasibility, obviously, because this is stock that is still in use, right? So by default, we classify this as a F4. And then the reuse scenario had a F41 because the existing research project on the reuse of magnets from cars. Back then, probably this has changed. And on the scenario 2 for the recycling scenario, back in 2015, so there were technology currently being researched, but no successful pilot studies had been completed yet back then, and no published data. So this is why on the technical feasibility, the score, let's say, of this project was rather low. Next, please. And for the conclusions, so this resource classification has to be performed always on a case-by-case basis. So one would have to consider the drivers of the project, the site-specific parameters, such as the type, the location, the volume, the composition of this deposit, the project-specific parameters, so what technology are selected, the project setup, what permits, licenses, and so on. Then the systemic context is very important. So what kind of legislation is in place, especially with respect to waste streams? What markets do we have and what regional infrastructure? And then the timing of mining, how are costs most likely to develop in the future, prices, but also legislation and available data in general. Resource classification provides decision support for mining the anthroposphere, so it allows to establish inventories of available and accessible anthropogenic resources at the regional and national level. It allows to compare different resource recovery projects and scenarios, and it makes critical factors and potential barriers visible. Yeah, that was it from my side. If you have any questions, please feel free also to reach out by email, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrea. And we have the last case, and I would give a floor to Daniel. Do we hear each other, Daniel? Are you with us?
Yes. Good morning.
Perfect.
Thank you for the invitation. So I will present the last case study consisting on critical raw materials recycling projects in France. This is a work that we did in French Geological Survey with my colleague Liane Berulst. Please, next slide, Slavko. So the first work that we did in France concerning UNFC evaluation was after a request of DG GROW from the Commission, the European Commission, so the industry, the industry Directorate General, and they request us to map ongoing and potential primary critical raw materials projects in France and using UNFC. So we did this work and we map around 40 sites on projects ongoing on potential. But we state two facts. That first one is that France was already producing some CRMs as a byproduct. It's not gallium, it's indium, sorry. Indium from zinc and hafnium from zirconium. And France is also a CRM producer via recycling. So we decide to include ongoing projects producing critical raw materials after recycling or after byproduct recovery. And we use the UNFC guidelines for anthropogenic resources. And we classified these projects in terms of UNFC as viable projects, even though you can be viable. And in some cases, the evaluation of the equivalent of geological knowledge can be tricky, let's say, to evaluate. Next slide, please, Slavko. No, it's okay. Then we decide to evaluate potential viable projects. That was the second step. So we identify some projects in France dealing with CRM recycling and projects at industrial upscaling, in upscaling processes. And we focus mostly in this phase work, batteries and this year we expect to work in permanent magnets also. So we evaluated with publicly accessible data, that means information coming from reports, press release, information that companies are delivering. And we evaluate as a list of criteria in a checklist. First of all, that's very important in UNFC to evaluate the technical feasibility, the degree of maturity of recycling projects and recycling treatments. Also, we evaluate if these projects are in industrial plants with already an environmental authorization or not. We evaluate also the knowledge of the composition of the recycled products and flows, like Andrea was mentioning previously in permanent magnets. That means which is the knowledge of the chemistry of batteries of permanent magnets. In general, is very well known, of course. But the other point is which is the capacity to collect waste streams. And these projects, these industrial projects, the question is, are they associated to waste collectors, which is the capacity to these industrial recycling projects to collect enough waste to be viable in the future. And then, of course, the information was about quantities, which is quite difficult to obtain this kind of information. Maybe in some cases we had expected annual production, for example. But that's what's one of the factors that was most difficult for us to collect as information. So next one, please. So we evaluate quite easily ongoing projects already producing secondary critical raw materials. So projects that are viable because they are ongoing, even though in some cases the knowledge of the geological knowledge is not very well known. We did this work combining primary and secondary resources, and we have to keep in mind the main goal is also to be comparable between primary and secondary, and that's very important. Discussing with our authorities, with French Environment Ministry, they consider that UNFC is a very good tool to monitor the progress of projects, primary and secondary both, and identify also which criteria, which factors are blocking social acceptability, the technical feasibility, technological, waste collection, etc. And if we compare primary resources projects and secondary resources, for example, recycling plants that are already producing are equivalent to quarries and mines exploiting and producing, and potential viable in mining is research, exploration permits, active projects, and the project that I mentioned previously, so industrial upscaling of recycling projects, are more or less the equivalent to these research and exploration projects in primary resources. And I think that's all from my side. Thank you very much.
So now we actually finished a package of 4 case studies, and we will turn on the way forward. We will hear from Soraya. She will tell us about the Futuram project activities and plans, and later on from Maria from DG Grow. So I would give the floor to Soraya. You would share the screen, and you can start. Thank you. Are you with us? We can't hear you. You are on mute.
Sorry, I was muted. Hello, everybody. Do you see my screen?
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you. So I'm pleased to present a Futuram project here and to show our activities. And all our work builds on the knowledge and the results of previous projects, initiatives, and tools, as well as network activities. And here, our main goal is to develop knowledge on the availability and the recoverability of secondary raw materials in Europe, and also with a specific focus on critical raw materials, and also make an overview on that, what we expect in future until 2050. The other part is also to have a fact-based decision-making to enable that for the exploitation through UNFC applied to secondary raw materials projects. And of course, as we heard from the other presentations, it is important to disseminate this information, and that will be done by a systematic, transparent secondary raw materials, but not knowledge base. In Futuram, we will look at 6 different waste streams. These are batteries, electrical and electronic equipment, vehicles, slags and ashes, mining waste, and construction and demolition waste. And we put one of our activities is puts the focus on UNFC applications. And here in the map, you see these 10 different site-specific and regional projects which will be developed during that time period. And we have also projects which will be done on national level, and which can be seen in this map. We heard that the project inventory is that what we want to get. We want to have that not only on the company level, but also on the national level and the European level. And we heard the different case studies which showed that it is possible to apply UNFC, but the point is how to do that. And we want to make it in a harmonized procedure and show how it works across these 6 different sources and commodities. And that, as already said, we have to define the project to see what is the aim, what we want to achieve, and who is involved in that. Also to consider the stakeholders from the beginning, to work on the project evaluation, which will be used for the classification of the project, and also, and as stressed by Ulrich, to have a reporting of this project to provide information to everyone. And so based on our work, we want to have a standardized procedure and also to provide a guidance document how to use this this development of this project, and at the same time to have a reporting template to make it easy to communicate all these results with the stakeholders. And these all should hopefully be endorsed as standards under UNFC. We heard about this classification, and we showed, Andrea showed this cube, which shows its the 3 dimensions of UNFC. And so each of these boxes has a specific information, and that makes it easy to communicate which level, maturity level the project has. On one side, the degree of confidence regarding the quantity of the material we can gain is one, and the other one is the technical feasibility. These are really needed work to have this knowledge, and the better the knowledge is, the higher is also, so we get to 1 in each case. And so that means the term 334 means that there is a potential in the project, but there is quite a lot of information to be developed. And the crucial part is the e-axis, which shows in how much really the project can be performed. That means, is it really economic? What about the environmental and social impact? And how is the legal situation? How is these aspects have also to be considered? And so these, by developing the project, we can proceed and see where are the barriers for the project and what has to be done to provide a new step to bring it from a potential project to one to is really viable in the future. So to bring it from the blue box to the yellow and then to the green box. And this all is necessary. And for that, we need this standardized procedure and also the guidance to enable to have a consistency and transparency regarding the project development status and also the inventory of the project. It also enables to compare the different projects and so to implement a sustainable resource management policy and regulation. Currently, we started June 2022, and now we are in the process to develop a consistent procedure to assess and classify the secondary raw materials recoverability. And that will be done together with the case studies. We will also test it, and we will use the outputs to improve our procedure and to come up with a validated and conception and provide the guidance how to use that. And at the end, we want to have the draft reporting standard and bring it to attention to the UNFC EGRM. And if hope you are interested and follow our homepage, futuram.eu, to see where we are and what we achieved. And so to come to the results, I hope that we could show you today that UNFC is a powerful tool to communicate in a simplified manner the needed information to facilitate the development of projects, not only on local level, but also regional, country level, and also EU level, and beyond that. It enables us to communicate the maturity of the project, to include the uncertainties and risks, but also to show the driving factors associated with such recovery projects. we need standardized procedures to provide the needed information for fact-based decisions to be taken by the different case stakeholders, either project developers in the companies, authorities, investors, policymakers, but also to build trust in the society. And based on that, the UNFC-based inventory of resources has the potential to be a part of effective, efficient national accounting. At the end of the Futurum project, we want to show how UNFC can be applied with 19 new case studies and propose a guidance document how to develop these projects and how to evaluate them, and also to have this draft reporting template, which is important to communicate all this information which are needed from the different stakeholders. And all that to make the recommendations for UNFC, EGRM, and European Commission. And with that, I want to finish my presentation. You see all our members, organizations participating here, and look forward to answer your questions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Soraya, and we are now, we need to share. Okay. Right, and now we go to our next presentation. Maria, you are with us?
I am. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you. And the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Slavko, and good morning to all. This webinar comes very timely because just a couple of days ago, the European Commission came forward with a Critical Raw Materials Act, which actually makes several references and recommendations for the use of UNFC, including for secondary raw materials. I'll get to that, but considering the quite broad audience we have today, I thought it could be good to mention a little bit about the EU overall raw materials policy. If you could go to the next slide, please. Actually, already back in 2008, the EU Raw Materials Initiative set out a strategy for tackling the issue of access to raw materials in the EU by supporting more recycling and higher circularity, a sustainable supply of raw materials from European sources, and a level playing field in access to resources in third countries. The Raw Materials Initiative was the basis for the European Innovation Partnership for Raw Materials that was set up in 2012, and it was complemented with a strategic implementation plan in 2013, which has been driving concrete actions for the raw materials sector, with funding made available under the EU framework programs for research and innovation, currently Horizon Europe. 3 years ago, we came forward with the Critical Raw Materials Action Plan, which holds 10 concrete actions to increase EU resilience and open strategic autonomy, including international diversification, research and innovation, and the development of CRM production capacity in the EU. We have an industrial alliance in place also since 2020, the European Raw Materials Alliance, and this alliance brings together key players to strengthen EU resilience in terms of access to sustainable raw materials by promoting investments, by fostering innovation, and increasing the recycling of CRMs that go back into production, and also by developing knowledge and skills. So we have been ambitious already in the past and aware of the great importance that securing the sustainable access to raw materials and specifically critical raw materials has. But if we turn to the next slide, please. Today, we see that there is a global race going on for the supply of critical raw materials, and the game has changed, and we need to do even more. And we have come to realize that if we don't find the tools to ensure access to critical raw materials, we will lose the technological race and not be able to achieve our green and digital transition, the European Green Deal. We have a plan to address this, the Green Deal Industrial Plan, which has been announced by our President von der Leyen. And it's on this basis that we came forward last week with the Critical Raw Materials Act. This initiative will help Europe to move fast with ambition to build our domestic supplies and diversify our imports. It will, we believe, allow our industry to be better prepared for future possible shortages that could arise, and at the same time stay competitive and keep our single market thriving. So we are building on our strengths, and we will continue to lead on the sustainable and circular practices in place and pave the way for a clean European industrial future, while meeting the objectives of the green and digital transition. The Critical Raw Materials Act builds on 4 pillars that you see here. If you go to the next slide, please. So it is about strengthening all stages of the European critical raw material value chain, first of all. Then it is about improving EU capacity to monitor and reduce supply risk of critical raw materials. Thirdly, it's about diversifying EU imports of critical raw materials to decrease our strategic dependencies. And lastly, and perhaps with the highest relevance for our conversation this morning, it's about ensuring the free movement of critical raw materials on the single market while safeguarding a high level of environmental protection and improve the circularity and sustainability. And if we stay with this 4th part about circularity and sustainability, measures that are included are, for example, that member states are required to come up with national plans on how the circularity and the recovery of CRMs from various waste streams will be achieved. We have also come forward with measures to promote the recovery of CRMs from extractive waste. One of the waste streams in question in the Futuram, one of the 6 waste streams in question of the Futuram projects. We have also proposed measures to promote the recyclability of products that contain permanent magnets. So we have proposed information requirements, and there is a possibility also for to come forward with recycled content target for products containing permanent magnets. And the communication that accompanies the critical raw materials legal initiative, this communication also brings forward a range of measures that will strengthen circularity and grow the market for secondary critical raw materials. If we look at the references and the recommendations for the use of UNFC in the Critical Raw Materials Act, thank you, you will see that we say that for the strategic projects, they should provide a classification according to UNFC, and to be able to assess the social, environmental, and economic viability and the feasibility of the project, as well as the level of confidence of the estimates. So that is one of the references. We also say that the national exploration programs that member states are requested to carry out, that they should present the information on the mineral occurrences containing CRMs, that it should be compatible with the classification in UNFC. And we are also asking member states to feed into the monitoring of the supply risk by providing information on any new raw material project using UNFC. And there is one specific reference to that to promote the recovery of CRMs from extractive waste. Member states are required to set up a database of known closed abandoned extractive waste facilities with information of quantities and concentration of raw materials in the extractive waste, and to include, where possible, a classification of these materials according to UNFC. So you see that we are quite ambitious as concerns making use of this system. I'd like to conclude by saying that we see UNFC as an important building block of the EU raw materials policy, where higher circularity and more recycling that go back into production is really fundamental. And this is why we think that this webinar this morning is so important. And we will be part of the UNFC Resource Management Week in April and the seminar on deploying UNFC at that time. So thank you for taking part in this meeting. Happy to liaise further, and thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Slavko.
Thank you, Maria. We actually came to the discussion point. I believe you all heard a lot on the activities and the plans for the implementation of the UNFC secondary raw materials. Before we kick off with the discussion, I would call my colleague Walker to share the screen because this is one of the main takeaways that we would like you to have after our seminar. He will also post this one-pager on UNFC in the chat, so that would give you the idea from where we are coming and where we are actually going. That's for the start of the discussion. We are following the chat, and my other colleague is telling me that all the questions in the chat were already answered by the presenters or other participants. If there is any other question or urgent statement, please write it in. If not, maybe I would ask all the presenters if some of them would want to add a statement or two on this. If you believe that something was not said or sufficiently stressed. So let's try to do it now within discussion time. Do we have anyone? No. I'm not sure that everything was that clear, but in any case, I believe we have all the main information. Daniel, you want to come in or no? Okay. So nobody wants to start, and that would give us a few minutes. I would move on what was already said. Well, there is a question. What do you see as the main challenge for mineral exploration? If we are talking about the mineral exploration for primary and secondary raw materials, this would definitely be something else. And I believe Ronald would be the one perfect to answer what would mean mineral exploration for secondary raw materials. So Ronald, please.
Actually, it is determination of the resource and the permitting. It's similar challenges as is for the primary, I would say. So the initial steps here is that we, even if we know that we have huge amount of waste, it is what to do and how to do with it, and how costly will it be to recover the raw materials in it. So it must be done by case. It cannot be done on the full bulk material.
Thank you. Do we have any other question at this point? I hope you did download the one-pager that you would get the idea of what is happening with the UNFC and what are the essentials, not only the details. So I would use a bit of time to actually invite you to participate at the seminar that already Maria mentioned. It's a seminar entitled Deploying UNFC in Europe and Beyond to Assure Information for Sustainable Resource Management. That would be here in Geneva on the 25th and 26th of April. The seminar is organized within the broader EGRM week and is organized by UNECE, DG GROW, the Futuram project, and also the GSEU, Geological Service for Europe project. The seminar will be followed by the closed meeting organized by DG GROW in the afternoon of the 26th, where the linkages between the UNFC and the recently announced Critical Raw Material Act proposal will be a bit more discussed. What I want also to emphasize is that travel support is available for one governmental official per country on a first-come, first-served basis. Travel support will be offered, will be provided according to UN rules. I put my name and my email there, so in case some of you would be interested to come and to get more in-depth knowledge on the UNFC, and you are within the government, we would be able to support your coming to Geneva for the seminar with the return of airfare ticket and the 2 per diem, of course. So, but please note that you are welcome to participate also to the rest of the whole raw materials week. So this is happening in a bit more than 1 month in Geneva. In case you are not able to come, of course, the whole week, including the seminar, will also be online. I think in the meantime, we have a question that how does UNFC address quality of recycling and definition of recycling in a post-consumer waste? I believe this would be a question for Soraya. Please come in.
Yes.
And Ronald as well.
I was just starting to answer that. That is a very good point, and that has to be considered when we make this evaluation and classification of these materials. We have to also to consider that not only to look at the quantity, which is available, it is recoverable, but also to think about the quality of the materials and also to think about how much it can be recycled. And that is something that some of these aspects which we will consider in our work, considering these different kind of waste streams and what kind of and the outcomes we want to achieve by that.
Thank you, Soraya. Ronald, you did answer on the chat, but you want to add anything in this case?
No. Well, I see the voice that asked about processing residue, and yes, it's always a challenge, and it has to be found place for it, unless it's stored in the same place. Another challenge is actually to work with these matters safely, because it's exotropic, usually the tailings. Meaning that when you start to shake it, it becomes a liquid.
The next question would be from Suzanne. If it would be good to address the quality of recycling in the revision of Waste Framework Directive. Is there anyone that was dealing with the Waste Framework Directive more in depth? Daniel, you want to?
Yeah, just maybe I answer in the chat. In our case, we didn't take into account very the different if recycling processes were downcycling or not, and which was the final commodity delivered. Of course, we defined the goal of a project and the goal and scope of a recycling project, but we didn't go into this level of detail. But of course, that's very important. That's also a question in future on project. And Suzanne, I think she's aware of that, of course. But we have also to keep in mind that we have to be more or less comparable to primary projects and UNFC evaluation of primary projects. So we have to be aware if we complexify a lot anthropogenic UNFC evaluation, maybe we are losing this comparability with primary. So that's just a warning about that.
If I could come in, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
Yes, on the question of the quality of recycling, to address that in the revision of the Waste Framework Directive, you will see that in the communication that accompanied the legislative initiative, the Critical Raw Materials Act, a number of legislative measures, forthcoming legislative measures are mentioned, including a forthcoming review of the WEEE directive, which would have implications also on the horizontal legislation as set out in the Waste Framework Directive.
Pascal, I believe this would be the last one we'll take on how the G-axis, how the G-axis degree of confidence is defined. How do you qualify a project as G1 confident and G3 non-confident? In a very nutshell, when you gather all the information from the assessment, you actually see how credible, how confident are the results. This would go in a very simple way, 90%, 50%, and 10%. degree of confidence in the results that you have. This would be in a very simple way. You would have in the Crisco template a very well defined factors in which you need to respond in a way that the degree of confidence or geological knowledge, or what we can say information on the quality and the quantity of the resource is defined. It would, as I said, it would go in on the level of, on the degree or of confidence as such. And this is defined through the templates. That would be in a very simple way how to respond. If anyone else wants to add on that. If not, then
just
Yeah.
for post-con. Sorry, Ronald, please.
No, I would just like to add, when a mining companies go into mining waste, they usually use same procedure as for primary, so it's based upon statistics and density of sampling.
yeah, okay, Daniel.
And for post-consumer like batteries, permanent magnets, etc., like Andreas said it in his presentation. One thing is to know the composition of the product, so the composition of a permanent magnet, the composition of a battery, the chemistry. That's one thing. And then I think in G-axis we have also to integrate in post-consumer waste, which is the stock and flows, and also the capacity of a project to collect this flow. I mean, and that's one thing that we try to take into account in our evaluation in France. It's not so easy, and that's also a challenge for Futurama. But one thing is the waste composition, and then is the capacity to collect this waste for a project, because a project is a recycling process plus a waste collection in a place.
Thank you. Thank you. With this, I think we came to the closing part. I believe that this seminar, besides sharing the information, also helped building the community. And I believe that on one side, the speakers, and on the other side, the participants will be able to connect in the future and extend the what I would call the secondary raw materials UNFC community. So I think this is one of the goals from this seminar that was achieved, besides presenting the state of the world. So at the end, let me thank for the presenters of this seminar, all the speakers. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for assisting in the chat discussion as well as the other discussion. I would also thank my technical team that is not seen but all around, to Walker, Gadi, Maurizio, Alessia. And of course, I would thank you, the participants, for the participation. And again, invite everyone to the seminar and the UNEC Resource Management Week in 1 month time in Geneva. Thank you very much. And with this, I would close the workshop. Thank you.